So right here we go. Everyone in the English channel, we go. So spotlight, master, admit all, record.
So welcome everyone to the Big Love Summit. This session has been organized by the FDCW to celebrate and share programs that help us to develop our compassion, ethics, and wisdom. So our presenter will speak for about 40 minutes, and there will be a chance for questions at the end. So you can also write questions in the chat during the presentation. And at the end of the session, if there is time, they will be as well raised. It is a great pleasure and joy for me to introduce today's speaker, Ceci Buzon, who I consider a great friend, a mentor, and a role model. Cecilia holds a diploma in neuropsychoeducation from the University of Buenos Aires, and in 2015, she got a scholarship to study at the University of Berkeley, California. And she is currently studying emotional education for trauma and resilience at the University of Buenos Aires. And she trained in creating compassionate cultures in France and at the Tara Redwood School in California. As well as Cecilia is a facilitator at FDCW, a neuroeducator and mindfulness therapist, and primary and secondary school teacher in Argentina. She has over 23 years of teaching experience and has been the director of her own school in Argentina for over 17 years. Cecilia will present on the power of resilience, and this presentation will resume the latest knowledge about collective trauma together with the most effective tool to boost resilience, both at a personal level and with our communities. So if you are interested in acquired mindfulness techniques and nonviolent communication skills, this presentation is for you. So without further delay, I hand over to Cecilia. I hope you enjoy the session.
Thank you, Magda. Thank you so much. Welcome, everybody. It's such a joy, such a pleasure to be here at this Big Love Summit. Thank you, FDCW, for this opportunity of sharing together one more year. Thank you, Dina, for doing a translation into Russian. What a pleasure to have you all here with us sharing this morning in Argentina. Thank you very much. All right, so to start with, I'd like to invite you to do together a very short grounding activity. And remember, as Lama Yeshe always used to say, to bring our minds where our bodies are. So shall we start together? Very short, just a couple of minutes, to bring our mind home, to come to our body, to relax for a moment, to prepare for what is going to be shared in the next hour. So if you're willing to, and I hope you are, find a comfortable posture, a position that allows you to relax for a couple of minutes, hopefully with your back straight, your feet on the ground, the palms of your hands on your lap. You may choose to close your eyes or leave them slightly open. Just check that everything is comfortable for the next minutes. Let's take a deep breath together. Remember, when you exhale, to do it slowly, steady, long. And once again, deep breath in. And in the exhalation, slowly, steady, as long as possible. And then simply try to focus your attention. It may be a spot in your body, the tip of your nose, the movements of your chest, the movements in your abdomen, so as to bring your attention there with the intention of focusing it Steadying it. And invite ourselves to a moment of calm and relaxation and grounding. Bring our attention back to the present moment. For sure, thoughts, images will pop up in the sky of our mind. Just let them appear and disappear. Keep breathing. Keep bringing your attention to one specific spot. Keep bringing your attention into the present moment. Let's use this opportunity of steadiness to ask ourselves, what is our motivation to be here today, to be in this call? What is it that brings us together in this very moment? Just check within yourself. And also, let's use this opportunity to ask and revise within ourselves, what is it that I can bring to this meeting today? What is it that I can offer to others, to each person in the meeting today? Can I offer respectful listening? Can I offer a kind smile? What is it that I can offer? What is it that I can bring to the table today? Patience, respect, kind speech, humility to learn from one another. There is always something I can offer. I'll invite you now to bring this very short exercise to an end by taking a deep breath in. Whenever you feel ready, you may choose to open your eyes and come back to the group. You may want to do any movements that your body asks you to do. And get ready for this journey together. Well, as some of you already know me, I like to have participation in the talks and the presentations. So hopefully you will be willing to participate, to join into some activities, to have pen and paper at hand, to take some notes. Of course, this is just up to you, but hopefully you will. Right. And the first activity requires you to bring a hand to the table. So hopefully you want to do it with me. Bring your hand as a fist. And I'm going to be calling out some situations. And if you feel identified with any of them, you may pop up a finger for each situation you may feel identified with. In case you need, you may get used of the other hand as well. Okay, I'll be making pauses here and there to allow Dina to translation. And Dina, in case you need me to stop, you know, any signal is going to be okay. All right, so activity number 1. Ready, everybody? Okay, here we go. So raise a finger for each situation you feel identified with. Number 1, have you ever lost someone you truly loved? Have you ever got your heart broken? Have you ever been cheated on? Have you ever been deceived? Have you ever been a victim of a violent act? Have you ever been robbed or mugged? Have you ever been a victim of a political situation? Have you ever been fired from a job? Have you ever had economical problems that couldn't make ends meet? Have you ever dealt with suicidal ideas? Have you ever dealt with an illness or a physical difficulty or the illness of someone you loved? Now, is there anybody in this room who hasn't raised even one finger? I don't think so, right? And most of us needed both hands. So welcome to this club called A Precious Human Life. 99% of us, I'm sure, has felt identified with one of these very difficult and challenging situations we have all faced at some point in our lives. And one thing is for certain, we will face them again at some point or another. Suffer, as you may well know, you don't need me to say it so, it's a part of life. Gabor Mate, which is now a world's leading expert on trauma and addiction, says it very clearly. All stressful situations leave a mark on us, but not all stressful situations become trauma, though all traumatic situations are stressful. And very briefly, what we understand about trauma is not the situation itself that happens outside of us, but the interpretation and what is left inside of us as a result of that experience. If we come to think that the word trauma comes from the Greek word meaning wound, then we come to understand a bit better what trauma means. It's the wounds from the situations, the circumstances, the experiences we have had. And the major characteristic of a wound is that it hurts every time it is touched, again and again. Nowadays, it is being talked about collective trauma. And collective trauma is understood but as those situations involving a whole community, a whole country or region, and also the whole world. For example, where I live in Patagonia, Argentina, in a very small town, 30 kilometers away from the Andes Mountains, in 2011, we experienced a volcano eruption. 50 tons of ashes covered the town where I live. And so we could overcome that, but the people in the town, myself, were traumatized by the idea of being buried in ashes. That is collective trauma in a community. 9/11 in the United States marked collective trauma because people in the region, in the continent, and also in other continents, never flew and never walked into an airport in the same way. And of course, the COVID pandemic was or is considered to be the latest collective trauma at a world level, because the way we relate to each other has changed, and some politics has changed forever. Let me share with you a quote by Gabor Mate on this matter. I'm going to move this away from here. And it says, not the world, not what is outside of us, but what we hold inside traps us. We may not be responsible for the world that created our minds, but we can take responsibility for the mind with which we create our world. And it is in this quote that I came to join it with the idea of resilience. What is the possibility of overcoming that holds inside of us, that we hold inside, that keeps us trapped? What are the tools to again connect to the joy of life? How is it possible to do it with ourselves? And moreover, how is it possible to teach it to others? Gabor Mate also talks about the emotion turmoil that happens over a traumatic event. And he says that when you shut down emotion, because that happens when a trauma takes place, we disconnect. You are also affecting your immune system, your nervous system as a whole. So the repression of emotion, the disconnection from emotions, which is a survival strategy at one point, then becomes a source of physiological illness later on. And I would say psychological suffering later on as well. So, what can we use to counteract the effects, not only of a traumatic event, but of any difficulty in life. Remember that not all difficulties will become trauma, but difficult situations may keep us stuck, may keep us depressed, may keep us, trapped into a rabbit hole. And sometimes we don't have, or we haven't learned the tools to overcome that. And in this moment is where the word resilience comes in. Resilience is a word that comes from physics, and it talks about the capability of elements to bounce back after they have been under big pressure. And so when it was taken into psychology, it was understood as the ability human beings have to bounce back from difficulties, from difficult situations, from challenges. But not only the ability to bounce back, but to become better in that flourishing, in that coming out from that experience. So we are not only required to be back, but to be back better, more skillful, wiser, and hopefully more compassionate. This is what we are going to be exploring for the next couple of minutes. And when thinking about resilience, I started to research on tools and the latest scientific works on the best way of putting it into practice. But I thought of the tools that I had already learned more than 10 years ago. And it is the 16 guidelines. And I thought, first, let me ask, could you please raise your hand if you are familiar with the 16 guidelines program? So I know that if there is anybody who is not, could you please let me know? Okay, and just looking at the cameras. All right, so most of you are. As you may well know, the 16 guidelines programs work around 4 wisdom themes. And the very first time that Mariano Dwyer brought it to Argentina back in 2009, I didn't have grace in my hair back then, so quite a long time ago. I learned it as if it was a linear program. We had one wisdom theme and then another one, and then you move to the third one and going back until you reach the fourth one. But year after year of practicing with the wisdom themes and the guidelines, I came to understand how infinite the program is. And I came to visualize the wisdom themes as a circle. And so when starting to analyze how to put together resilience and the 16 guidelines, I visualized it as a circle and decided not to start with the first wisdom theme, but which one is considered the fourth one, the last one. Now it's not going to be the last one anymore. It's going to become our first step to work with resilience. Shall we start there? Hope you have pen and paper at hand. So, as you may well know, wisdom theme number 4 is how we find meaning. And again, when I first came to know the program, I had this idea that meaning was something out there, something that needed to be pursued, something that needed to be, reached at some point. But within the years, I've started to switch that idea, and I've started to think as meaning as something already inside of us, as a gem that we already have inside. It most probably is different for each of us. What is meaningful to you might not be the same thing that is meaningful to me, but still there. As if it were the roots that will keep you grounded in the middle of a storm. What is meaningful to you? What it is so meaningful to you that would keep you grounded and steady in the middle of a storm? What would be your principle? What would be that gem that would then lead you the way you think, the way you act, and the way you relate to others. Now I would like you to take a moment, just a minute, pen and paper at hand, and think of 1, 2, 3 words, 3 values that you would think of as your core values, your deepest roots, those that do not change substantially alongside your life. Which ones would it be for you? Just take a moment. Think about it. Think about it. What hasn't changed substantially throughout your life? What would be a root that would keep you grounded in the middle of a blizzard outside? Have you got it? Even if it's 1. If you would like, I would very much like if you could share it in the chat, only if you're willing to, just to have a couple of examples. Just a couple of examples. That would be lovely. Listening, curiosity, acceptance, love, kindness, and patience. Thank you. Kindness, curiosity, respect. Thank you, dear Denise. Awareness and feeling my own breath. Such an important root. Kindness, see how it repeats. Curiosity, forgiveness. So some of them are common core values. How lovely. Love, kindness, again, trust, integrity. It is, for me, I know for sure. Good. Good. You know, there is a very famous quote by Nietzsche that says, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." I'll repeat it once again. He who has a why to live can bear almost any how. I think this quote is inspirational. Stoicism. Oh, Avril, thank you. Thank you very much for bringing that up. So in this path of resilience, I would like to start with the so-called 4th wisdom theme of how to find meaning. What for? What is the meaning for? And nothing to pursue outside, but a gem that to be treasured inside. And it is from that source of inspiration, that source of meaning, that we will now explore better ways of thinking, acting, and relating to others in order to boost resilience, not only in ourselves, but moreover, when we are sharing with others. Understanding resilience as flexibility. You know, the physics explanation can be somehow difficult. Just think of resilience as flexibility. The flexibility of bouncing forward and, you know, back again. The flexibility of being in the middle of a storm and stay. The flexibility of bending and coming back. And in that journey, we will learn things and hopefully become wiser. The first psychology in using the word resilience out of the world of physics and into the human beings field was Joe Bowlby. He was the same psychology who wrote the first theory of attachment. But it was the French psychiatrist Boris Cyrulnik who brought the word and the theory of resilience into common ground. I absolutely recommend his books, and especially his studies around resiliency in children. Very, very important source of information. Okay. Now, we have how we find meaning. understanding that meaning as a gem inside of us. Now, from that place of meaning, shall we think better thoughts? Shall we explore the how we think wisdom theme from a resilient perspective? And if we think about it as flexibility, this is exactly what we need to train. We need to train ourselves, and if you're working with children, as it is my case, to be able to think in a more flexible way. So all sorts of activities that will lead you to leave rigidity behind will give you a boost in your resilience. Because when a difficult time comes, you may need to have different tools. You may need to explore different ways. Perhaps what you already know no longer serves you, and you need to start finding or even creating new ways to act, to relate to others, and moreover, to think. And in this respect, I would like to share with you one activity that I do at the school. It involves a poem. I read it with children who are around 8 or 9. Let's see if the sharing works. I'm going to here. Okay. This poem is called Mr. Grumpledump's Song. And yesterday, when I was putting this PowerPoint together, I was thinking of Denise. And I said, okay, she would be the perfect person to put some rhythm into this poem. So my dear Denise, this is thinking about you. This poem by Shel Silverstein goes like this. Everything is wrong. Days are too long. Sunshine is too hot. Wind is too strong. Clouds are too fluffy. Grass is too green. Ground is too dusty. Sheets are too clean. What a disaster. Stars are too twinkly. Moon is too high. Water is too drippy. Sand is too dry. Rocks are too heavy. Feathers too light. Kids are too noisy. Shoes are too tight. Folks are too happy singing their songs. Why can't they see it? Everything is wrong. So when we play with this in the classroom, it is with the idea of becoming more flexible. And for a day, we take this grumpy attitude and we complain about everything, of course, in a sarcastic way. But then we explore, how is it that it makes us feel? How is it that it makes others feel if we choose to think this way? And then we ask ourselves, is it possible that there is a better way of thinking? Is it possible that there is a way of thinking that would bring us more joy rather than being grumpy and complaining all day? So these kind of fun activities will provide, especially children, but it can be done with teenagers and with ourselves as well, this playful training in the way we think, because we can never train in the middle of the race. We need to train before the challenging times come. Another activity I used to do in the classroom is to play Giants and Dwarves. And when we choose a situation and we visualize that we become giants, and so we look at the situation or a landscape or whatever it is as a giant from high up above. And so the problem will become very small. The situation will become very small, but we will be able to have a panoramic view of the situation. And then we visualize ourselves as dwarfs. And so we got smaller, 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 and then we come into the problem, the situation or the landscape, and we looked at it into detail. So we may find things that from up above we would miss, and we would see now details that before we couldn't see. So again, we train flexibility. Within time, these kids will be taught to use pre-framing tool, for example, or reframing tool with the 16 guidelines. But the first thing we need to train is this flexibility of, becoming giant as a drone. Now it would be a more technological activity as a drone, looking at something from up above and then looking and going it into details. Another activity we do, especially with the children, is to become things that mold. There is a film which I love, its title, it's called The Shape of Water. The film has little to do with The Shape of Water. I don't know if you have watched it, but I like this title. And when a difficult situation comes, say, can you be like water? Can you adapt to the situation instead of becoming more rigid? Can you just adapt to the bowl, to the container, adapt to the situation, accept what is going on? Then we're going to decide what to do and so on and so forth. But first, can you take the shape of water? Little children, we were playing this game of becoming drops of water in the classroom all over the floor. And one of them told me that it was like being an ice cream cone. Ice cream cones melt in the sun. And then we started playing, becoming ice cream cones. How would you be? First, you have to choose your favorite flavor, of course. And then once you have chosen what flavor of ice cream would you like to be today, we play, how would melting in the sun be like? And so we melt into the floor, but with the idea of becoming, again, flexible and adaptable to situations, to step away from rigidity, to step away from, the one and only kind of thought. We say, okay, it has to be this way or none, this way or the highway, they say in English, right? Okay, so that is what resilience is not about. It will never be about just one possibility, but finding several ways in which to look at a situation. So that is in the field of how we think. Try to find activities and resources and tools that allows us to look at a situation from different angles, from different perspectives. And then we have to move into the how we act wisdom theme. And here we play the game of 5. When we have a situation, we always think of 5, minimum of 5 ways to respond or to act in front of this situation. Even if it is the most ridiculous one, we always think of 5, and then using critical thinking, we choose the most appropriate one. In this way, we are also training children and teenagers to think about causes and consequences. But for example, let's say that today I was too nervous, going to the poem, I was too nervous to do this presentation, which I was, of course. Now, what would be 5 choices in this situation that was for me nerve-wracking and a little bit stressful? Those minutes before you press and you go into Zoom call and you say, okay, maybe I can say that I don't have internet. Maybe I can say that another volcano erupted in Patagonia. Maybe I can say I have a terrible sore throat and I cannot speak. Well, maybe I can go and do the presentation and hope for the best. Maybe I can text a friend and ask for some support. So this is the activity. Again, practicing flexibility. What are 5 things I can do in the face of this situation? And you cannot cheat. You have to come to 5 minimum, even if it is the most ridiculous one. And then, of course, using critical thinking, you will have to choose the most appropriate one. In this case, as I am a grown-up, I am here with a teddy bear in my hand, just squeezing a teddy bear just to feel the support. But you are not seeing that, it's behind the screen, honey. But as a grown-up, I didn't pretend a sore throat or a volcanic eruption, and then I pressed go into the Zoom call. So another situation we use with how we act is rehearsal. We, again, choose different scenarios, and then we rehearse in the classroom. Okay, so when you have a difficult conversation, what are the different approaches you could have to tell a person that, I don't know, you weren't invited to a birthday party and that you feel bad? That would be a case of resilience for a 6-year-old, right? And so we rehearse possible scenarios, possible outcomes, and they can play how to act and feeling the consequences, and also having in mind how other people would react out of the actions that they would choose. So you can yell at a partner and see how the other person would react. You would say how you feel and explain what you would like to receive. You would just shut down and start crying. So we rehearse in the classroom different possibilities, and then we choose the one that we feel would be most appropriate in the situation, or the one that would make us feel better. But again, flexibility, resilience is at the core of any practice. So you can also practice different scenarios. And this is the pre-framing activity that the 16 guidelines have been teaching for so many years. And moving on, because we are running out of time, moving on to the how we relate to others wisdom theme. Here I would like to share with you very briefly the work of the psychologist Marshall Rosenberg, who is the creator of the nonviolent communication approach. Now, it is also called as compassionate communication approach. I don't know if you are familiar with it, but very briefly, it includes describing a situation as objectively as possible, saying how you are feeling or exploring how you are feeling within that situation, exploring your needs within a difficult situation or a challenge. Do you need to be safe? Do you need to be heard? Do you need help? Do you need support? What are your most fundamental needs in the face of this difficult situation? And the step number 4 that he proposes is then, at the very end, ask other person what the behavior that you would like to receive would be. But in this moment, I would like to share with you a poem that he uses to think about nonviolent communication and also compassion for others and for oneself. The other day I was enjoying Robina Curtin's presentation, and she said that in the Tibetan language or in the Buddhist language, there was not such thing as self-compassion, but just compassion. So this activity is both compassion for others, compassion for ourselves. So right before we finish this presentation, I'd like to invite you, once again, if you're willing to do it with me, hopefully you are, to bring to mind a person or a situation that somehow it's a bit challenging for you. Don't bring the most challenging person right now, please, or the most challenging situation right now, but just a person who causes you some difficulties, or a situation that causes you some discomfort, or a situation that you have recently had, a situation that you know you will be facing in the next couple of days, that neighbor that you know you're not the best friend with, that student that gives you headaches, that colleague that gives you headaches. This is the moment to bring them to this activity. Just try to visualize them. Even you can write down their names. Even it can be yourself if you're having a hard time right now. If you're having a hard time befriending yourself, you could be the heart of this activity? It will be a challenging one, right? Just bring that person or situation to mind. And if you're willing to, you may close your eyes and visualize him, her, yourself, the situation, or write the name down, write the situation down. Just as you hold it in the eye of your mind, and if you can, as you hold them, it, him or her, in your heart, I'll invite you to repeat these words after me in your mind. Please see me beautiful. Please look for the best in me, because that is what I really am and all I want to be. It may take some time. It may be hard to find, but please see me beautiful. See me beautiful each and every day. Could you take a chance? Could you please find a way to see me shining through in everything I do? Please, please see me beautiful. Can you imagine for a moment if this was our approach to relate to others each and every day? What would be the outcome if this would be the approach to relate to ourselves also each and every day? And if we could see challenges and difficult situations in this compassionate eye, how would everything else change and help us bounce back more rapidly and more shiny and more joyful? It's not often easy, but there is only one thing I can promise. It is always worth it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ceci. That was so wonderful. Thank you for sharing all of those advices. I really enjoyed that, and I'm sure others did too. Do we have any questions for Ceci? Does anybody want to ask some questions about what she shared? Feel free to either raise your hand using the reactions or drop it into the chat if you prefer. Here's a question. Can you see that, Ceci?
Yes.
Did you write the name of Gabor Mate, the French psychologist who writes about childhood development?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Gabor Mate is now the world leading expert talking about trauma, specifically addiction. But he has wonderful videos on YouTube. His latest book, The Myth of Normal, it's a must read, incredible. And also he has a book that struck me many years ago when I read it, and it's called When the Body Says No. And so he explores the symptoms behind traumatic events or very stressful events, and how those symptoms, of course, take a toll on the body. So very, very highly recommended. And then the other name that I would like to share with you is Boris Cyrulnik. He is a French psychiatrist, and he was the one to bring the idea of resilience to the whole world, although he was not the first one to use this term, but it was John Bowlby many years ago who brought it from physics to psychologists. Boris Cyrulnik has many books talking about resilience in children and how to teach them to be resilient. Of course, we are all born with this capacity for developing resilience, but it is in the first years of our lives that the way we respond is formed just because of imitation on the way that adults around us responded to challenging situations. If it was with avoidance, if it was with a compassionate way of looking at it, if it was with anger. But regardless, the experiences we had in our childhood, of course, the good news is that we can become aware of our default mode of acting, and we can work and practice new tools to improve it in the fields that we don't feel comfortable enough. For me, it was in this, how I relate to others. So Marshall Rosenberg's, I can write his name here also, and his approach on compassionate communication also helped me tremendously. Another reference. And of course, I just share some activities that we developed in the schools and different teachers came up with, but they are just ideas so as to, in a playful way, practice. It doesn't have to be theoretical, unserious, and boring. It doesn't have to be like that. Just any way in which you can come up with being flexible. And today we are grumpy. You know the dwarfs from, is it Cinderella and the Seven Dwarfs story? Is it called like that?
Snow White.
Snow White, sorry, the other one. I confused princesses. Snow White. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. And so we chose to be one dwarf every morning, and we acted as like that dwarf. And then children can have, a bag full of resources. So how are you going to choose to be today? And what would be the consequences of choosing being grumpy for the day? What would be the consequences of choosing to be the one who was very sleepy or lazy all day? Just that, ideas to be playful with it.
Do you have any suggestions, Ceci, on how to address issues around the climate and the planet changing and all of those crises that are happening that we see in the news with children? So I sort of struggle with my 7-year-old, talking to him about that without making it sound really frightening and catastrophizing. So could you have any advice around that?
I was going to say exactly the same thing. I think that the danger of facing those problems with children is not to sound hopeless. This has happened, the world is coming to an end, I'm so sorry for you. No, I think that the resilience part here is how we act. So in that wisdom theme, I find the key to say, okay, what can we do? This is the situation. Again, we can be ice cream. We can take the shape of water. We are going to accept it. We're not going to deny it. We're not going to pretend it doesn't exist. Okay, the shape of water, we accept it. The situation is what it is. Now, let's jump into the next one. How we act. What can we do about it? Even if it is planting trees, as it has been talked about this week, joining a global movement, protesting, writing signs. What is it that we can do? And in that, thinking that some part of the solution is in our hands, we fight hopelessness, this feeling of there's nothing I can do. And we have to be careful with there's nothing I can do, because it might lead to apathy and depression. So what is it? Okay, it will not change the whole world. I understand. If we separate trash at home, it will not change the whole world, but we are doing our parts. And part of the solution is in our hands. So I always focus on that. Now, we had a pollution problem in the lakes around the school last summer, and say, okay, what is it that we can do? And we organized an afternoon, and we just went with the children and cleaned beaches. Some of the beaches, at least we gathered some bags of trash and say, we are doing our part. So never leave them think there's nothing they can do. Even if it is the smallest thing, then go for it.
Yeah, I agree. It's like I was watching something on the news last night. In the UK, we're going through quite a financial crisis, and the food banks are becoming more and more overwhelmed. And they were speaking about one single mother who had 3 children, and she could barely make her, feed her family. And my husband said, well, how are they even going to get presents at Christmas? Santa's not even going to come for them. We need to tell our son so he understands the reality of this world. And I was like, well, be careful. Maybe what we can do, because I've been at the summit this week and there's all about, transforming what seems like a hopeless situation. I said, why don't we instead say, why don't we collect some toys from your room that you don't use anymore, that you've grown out of? Let's take them down to the local charity that are giving for other children so they can have a present at Christmas. And so we take a difficult situation that seems overwhelming and we make it like, here, we've made this contribution and you can feel good about that rather than feeling sad.
I mean, we are allowed to feel sad. Sad, it's a very healthy feeling. Sadness, it's a very healthy feeling. It means that we are processing a loss, a situation that is no longer how it used to be. Sad is very healthy. But sad without any action, it may become apathy or depression. We have to be careful not to fall in the rabbit hole of depression. And that is the rabbit hole of what for? That is the rabbit hole of not having a meaning, not having a purpose. So we have to avoid that. Yes, we are sad. It's a difficult situation. But what can we do about it? What is in our hands? At the beginning of this talk, when we were doing a breathing activity, I asked you to check on your motivation, because that gives us, a north, that gives us a purpose. And also, this is something I do in the classroom. What is it that I can offer? There is always something to offer, even if it is my smile, even if it is my respectful listening, even if it is whatever it is. There is always something to offer, even if it is a prayer, even if it is our good wishes for the situation to improve. But this is, again, a tiny activity that we can do every day, just to step outside from the paper, from the role of a helpless victim, even if we can choose our attitude. And I know there are terrible situations in the world right now. I'm not minimizing situations, and I'm not saying that all solutions are in our hands. We are very far from that. But we need to step out, and resilience has to do with what can I do about it, instead of just, being like that, saying I'm a victim, there's nothing I can do. Can I even change the way I think, the way I see it? Can I even change my attitude towards it? So what can I offer? Can I offer good wishes? Can we make Christmas cards and just give it to our neighbors around your block? And as you said, can you take some toys for other children? Can you offer a prayer and maybe light a candle in this very difficult situation? Can we even do that? So you step away from the hopelessness feeling of it is out of our hands, and I am in the midst of other people's decisions, which we are, sadly. We're
going to wrap up soon, Ceci. I think Niv has a question. Niv, do you want to ask your question?
Just to share, first, Ceci, thank you so much. It's always such a pleasure listening to you. Really, it's if we had more principals and teachers like you, the world would be healed immediately. Seriously, thank you so much. And just to share a thought, speaking of principles, when we've tried to work with it in Israel and to translate it to Hebrew, there was always a certain amount of objection to the word, because people felt it's a bit too rigid sometimes. And I think that the concept and the notion of flexibility that you've just described here in all the other wisdom themes as well is just the perfect match and the completion for that guideline, which is essential also, I think, for the how we find meaning. We need to combine them both. So it's like in yoga practice, for example, it's like the core and the but without the flexibility, it's just we're not going to get anywhere. So thank you very much for this.
Thank you, Nev. Thank you. Well, we've reached the end of our time here, and thank you so much to Ceci for her wonderful, effervescent fun, happy presentation with plenty of tools and insights into resilience and ways that we can share them, not with just ourselves, but also with children. And I think we've got some of the links there in the chat that Angela's been sharing. The recording will be uploaded onto our website. So thank you so much, Ceci, for just blowing us away once again. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
And, please do tune in for Pam Caton, who will be talking about compassion and pathways to compassion at 6 o'clock this evening, which is GMT time. So you don't want to miss that. So thank you all for joining us today, and we'll see you in the next session. Thank you, Ceci.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you. Thank you.